1% of every human being alive right now is a psychopath. That is approximately 80 million people. They live among you, work next to you, and some of them have already charmed you in ways you have not yet recognized. But the part that should unsettle you most is not that they exist. It is that evolution kept them for hundreds of thousands of years. Natural selection had every opportunity to remove them from the gene pool, and instead chose to maintain them at a precise, stable frequency across every human population ever studied. Which means that at some point, being a psychopath was not a mistake. It was a strategy. The question nobody thinks to ask is, a strategy for what? Not what you think. We have a story we tell ourselves about psychopaths. That they are broken, aberrations, the rare, catastrophic failure of a human mind. The serial killer, the monster, the creature behind the police tape. That psychopathy is what happens when something goes wrong in the construction of a person. A flaw in the wiring, an accident of development that produces something most of us will never encounter. That they exist in spite of evolution. That nature, given enough time, will eventually correct them. But the evidence keeps telling a different story. A more disturbing one. A more human one. Because psychopaths are not a malfunction. They are a design. And the moment you understand why they exist, you will never look at the people around you or yourself the same way again. Start with the definition. In 1993, Canadian psychologist Robert Hare published Without Conscience, the result of more than a decade of clinical work with psychopaths in Canadian prisons. Hare had developed the psychopathy checklist revised, a 20-item assessment that became the global standard for identifying the condition. What he found was not a population of obvious monsters. It was people who were charming, articulate, intelligent, and fully aware of right and wrong, who simply did not care. Not because they could not reason about consequences, because they felt nothing when they imagined them. No guilt, no fear, no empathy, not suppressed emotion, absent emotion. A brain that processes the suffering of others the way most brains process background noise. Now, here is the question that evolutionary biology spent decades trying to answer. If psychopaths destroy the people around them, exploit their partners, betray their allies, and leave trails of damaged lives, why does natural selection keep them at exactly 1%? Why not 0? The answer is game theory. In the 1970s and 80s, evolutionary biologists began applying game theory to human behavior. What they found was that in any population where most individuals cooperate, where trust and long-term relationships are the dominant strategy, a small number of exploiters can thrive. The exploiter takes what cooperation produces without contributing to it. He moves faster, feels no guilt, and in the short term extracts more than anyone playing by the rules, but only while he is rare. As the number of exploiters in a population increases, two things happen. Other members become better at detecting them, and exploiters begin running into each other. The strategy collapses when it scales. So the frequency stabilizes just high enough to be sustainable, just low enough to avoid triggering full population-level resistance. This is what evolutionary biologists call frequency-dependent selection. Psychopathy persists at roughly 1% in human populations not despite natural selection, but because of it. It is not a bug. It is a parasitic strategy that the system keeps in check at the exact level where it remains viable, and it is written into the body. Twin studies give the heritability of psychopathic traits at between 40 and 78%. The MAOA gene, known informally as the warrior gene, has a low expression variant, consistently linked to aggression and impulsivity. The amygdala, the brain structure that processes fear and registers distress in others, shows measurably reduced volume and activity in psychopathic individuals. The psychopath does not feel less fear because of a broken system. The system is calibrated differently. A brain that cannot register threat the way yours does is also a brain that can walk into a room and perform, decide, and act without the hesitation fear produces in everyone else. But here's where it gets more complicated. In October 2005, neuroscientist James Fallon was at UC Irvine, reviewing PET brain scans of convicted serial killers. He was looking for patterns, reduced activity in the frontal and temporal lobes. The areas linked to empathy and self-control. Mixed in by accident were brain scans from a separate Alzheimer's study. He was running scans from himself and his own family. One scan stopped him. The orbital cortex was dark. The temporal lobes showed reduced activity. It was exactly the pattern he had spent years identifying in violent criminals. He double-checked the blinding protocol. He verified the machine. He checked again. The scan was as Fallon has a documented family tree containing at least 8 individuals accused of violent crimes. A cousin tracing the lineage found Thomas Cornell hanged in 1673 for murdering his mother. one of the earliest recorded cases of matricide in colonial America. The genetics were there. The brain structure was there. In his book, The Psychopath Inside, Fallon describes someone who behaves with genuine care for family and colleagues, but who, examining his own motivations, finds something underneath the behavior he did not expect. He was not broken. He was different, and the difference had been in his family for centuries, occasionally producing something catastrophic and occasionally producing something that simply looked like confidence. Here is the part nobody talks about. Kevin Dutton, a research psychologist at the University of Oxford, published The Wisdom of Psychopaths in 2012. He had spent his career studying not the criminal manifestations of psychopathy, but the successful ones. He ranked the professions most likely to attract individuals with high psychopathic traits. At the top of the list, CEO, not serial killer, CEO. The traits that Robert Hare cataloged as the markers of a dangerous personality: fearless dominance, superficial charm, immunity to guilt, willingness to make ruthless decisions, absence of hesitation. These traits do not disappear in a board meeting. They become advantages. The surgeon who can open a chest without trembling. The negotiator who can walk away without looking back. The executive who can lay off 10,000 people and sleep without interruption. The traits are the same. The context determines whether they destroy or build. The first psychopaths were not aberrations. They were, according to evolutionary theory, the exploiters who kept cooperative societies from becoming too comfortable. The pressure of their existence, the necessity of detecting them, protecting against them, building norms that could contain them, may have driven the very social intelligence that makes civilization possible. We built trust because we needed to identify who could not be trusted. We built law to constrain those who felt no internal constraint. We built conscience as a species in part because we were always living among those who did not have one. The psychopath did not arrive after civilization. He arrived with it. Now look at the institutions you trust, the rules you follow, the people you have decided, without quite knowing why, to be careful around. Something in your brain has been running that calculation for a very long time. Something that learned across hundreds of thousands of years that exactly 1% of the people around you were playing a different game. The question is not whether psychopaths shaped human history. The question is how much of what you call civilization was built specifically to survive them.